Well, welcome everybody. We're going to talk about May today. I'm here with Channing again. Let's see what we've got in store for us.
Now, beginning in May, we've got Venus here, we've got the Sun here, we've got Mercury here. We've still got 4 planets in retrograde.
Yeah. Why don't we talk about each of those separately? Like, for example, the ones in Taurus and then the ones retrograde, because those are going to have combined influence. But let's start with retrograde, because people seem to like that a lot.
Okay. Yeah, well, that retrograde is sort of the internal reflection to help us rework the area of life that's influenced by those retrograde planets. So we've got Mercury retrograding in Taurus until May 22nd. So for 3 weeks out of this month, we're going to be dealing with Mercury, his energy going more inward, more backwards. And we had talked about, how people really don't like Mercury retrogrades because there's a lot of associations with everything going haywire, especially things to do with Mercury, like communications and contracts and business. But it is important to remember that the reason why those things are going haywire are because there's areas of life where you need to step up your game a little bit and learn how to pay more attention, learn how to use Mercury more efficiently. So if your computer crashes and you lose all your information, unfortunately, it may be because you didn't take the time to back up all your information, that kind of thing. So when Mercury goes retrograde, it tends to show us how to be more efficient. And this is happening in the area of Taurus. So this is resources, this is values, this is money, this is our artistic endeavors, this is our family, this is also balancing out the nature of needing to take some time to enjoy the flowers, because Taurus is a fixed sign and it is that cow grazing in the field. So there is an element of enjoyment and sensations when you're in the Taurus energy. So it's also balancing out. It's saying you have to be enjoying what you're doing.
So the balance of work and the luxury of Taurus, since Venus rules over Taurus. And that's when Mercury goes stationary on May 22nd. Great.
Yeah. And then it takes until June 7th for it to cross back over all the degrees that it once was. And then it goes retrograde. So that sometimes is called the shadow period. So that it's still in the retrograde energy, meaning you're going to have to still go back and revisit all of those things that came up before Mercury went into retrograde, but hopefully you have a new way of managing them.
Right.
And, while Mercury is going in retrograde, Mars is also in retrograde from last month, and it's heading backwards. And during the month of May, later in the month, it's going to hit the sign of Scorpio again. So right when Mercury goes direct, we've got Mars entering into the sign of Scorpio, I think May 27th.
May 27th.
Yeah, so I'll try to stick with some chronological order. We won't even talk about that right now. But, so use that Mercury to really approach your financial and resources, and also taking the time to manage your energy so you can get out in beautiful areas and nature and relax a little bit too.
And it's probably helpful to know that, while Taurus does deal with all these things, that whatever sign Taurus is for you, like whatever house that sign is in, that's going to be the area where you have to pay attention to your resources in relationship to that house. So if you know your astrological chart, well, consider what sign is Taurus in relationship to the house, and then pay attention to Mercury's management of resources and things of this nature.
Yeah, and seeing how Mercury, I'm excited because Mercury's all these planets are in my 3rd house of communication and also things that I'm interested in. So, it may be more of a time where I get to sit down and really work on sharing some more of these ideas in different ways.
And we have an idea to talk about the outer planets here pretty soon. Channing says she's not ready, even though
I'm waiting for the Mercury retrograde.
Even though on the drive over here, she pretty much told me everything, and I thought about getting the camera out to record it, but we'll wait.
We'll see what comes out. We'll see what happens. So we have a new moon also in Taurus. So that's why the focus. That's
May 6th. That's
so
right.
That's in the beginning of May, and that's a nice. That's an interesting one. It's trining Jupiter and it's trining Pluto. So there's a lot of harmony and Venus is in its own sign during this time frame. and Mercury's there too, even though it's retrograde. So there's just a lot of energy with this new moon in Taurus. And last month we had talked about the new moon in Aries, and I was saying seeds of intention. This new moon in Taurus is interesting because it's in the nakshatra of Bharani. And so Bharani has a lot to do with, well, it's ruled by the goddess of death, right? Yama. And so, but the goddess of death steps in to create new form.
Right.
So it allows things to go so that it's giving birth. So it has this very much of this cycle of birthing new things, having to do with Yama and Bharani. And it's a very sensitive sign. So it's a very sensual sign, kind of the way that Taurus is. So, but it can go either way. So if you're in if you hear things that are harsh, you may feel more sensitive to those things. If you feel things that are more pleasing, you may be more sensitive to those things as well.
But this is happening in Taurus, where the moon does pretty well usually.
Oh yeah, the moon's in Mula Trikona in Taurus.
Yeah, so one of the things that people ask, particularly in regards to the last video about determining how is the moon full or new, someone asked, well, when I look at the moon, whether it's new or full, like what does that mean? So the fact that we've got the new moon there, like how would you speak to that being in Taurus? Just to give capacity to start things completely fresh, or a good place to plant the seeds of growth? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I see the new moon in general as a place to look at things freshly, to look at new ideas. And also realizing these planets are still in retrograde, so you're still working on an internal level of refocus, redirection. But this new moon in Taurus, because of the nakshatra that it's in, plus Venus ruling Bharani being in its own sign. So the ruler of this nakshatra is in such good dignity that it has an element of that Venusian, let's bring some of these Venusian things forward. Let's, in the sign of Taurus, ruled by Venus. Venus is there, Mercury is retrograding. I think it's a great time to kind of plan to bring more of the things Venus rules into your life.
Right. Well, also with the new moon, one of the things I've noticed is I remember the folk lore that is a great time to cut your hair if you want it to grow. Whereas if you cut your hair during the full moon, well, you're cutting it right at its peak. So it's sort of like this. It's a great time to prune things so that they can grow new from that. So if there's things in your life that you want to cut out, not to just totally get rid of them, but just to restart them and resculpt them and allow them to grow with greater vigor and strength, well, it's good to be done during the new moon, around May 6th. So anyway.
Yeah, and I always work up till the new moon. So you're working with the waning cycle. So you have a 2-week period where the moon's heading more and more towards new. So things are going to be less bound to grow back during that time frame. And then as the moon's waxing, things are more bound to grow.
Right.
So when I cut my hair, I make sure it's on the full moon or on the new moon or after during that 2-week period, because you're growing something new. And the moon is actually, when you plant seeds, the moon is actually pulling the water from the seed to the surface. So it's got a pull on it that can bring these things more up to the surface. So focus your manifestation intentions, because the moon is also about manifesting. And so the moon in Taurus has this really wonderful gift of bringing some of those things to light. So, put your intentions out there and then see if the universe brings it back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I learned that from my Italian ancestry, because my mom would always do their hair, my aunts and uncles and grandmother's hair on Friday, because she was a cosmetologist, beautician, whatever you call it nowadays. And they always had this thing
on Friday.
Yeah, on a Friday,
on Venus's day.
On a new moon, or after the new moon. That's when they would show up if they wanted their hair to grow. So things you learn.
And I like to take the new moon as it is a quiet day. I don't really try to get started on these new things. I like it as intention, and then start working the next day afterwards. And the next day, after the new moon, these planets are all trining Jupiter, and they're trining Pluto. So this new moon has a strong potential for newness. Pluto is something new. It's transformational, and Jupiter is expanding. So I do think that this has elements of
expanding your life in new directions.
Yeah, expanding life in new directions.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
And enhancing, enhancing those Taurean things. What do we enjoy? What brings us? What are our resources? We're not just working, scrambling, hopefully, to just survive and pay the bills. We want to have some balance of enjoyment, and company. So, and Jupiter turns direct.
Ah,
On May
nice.
9th.
Excellent. May 9th, Jupiter
Yeah.
direct.
Yeah, so right after a few days after that new moon, we've got a more direct energy coming to us with Jupiter. And I think that's going to be positive in general.
Yeah.
Jupiter is moving forward. And, we can kind of look to the areas in our life where that Jupiter has had to go inward. So instead of having outer expansion, because Jupiter's being squared by Saturn, so all the places where we are really trying to bust out and expand, we've got the brakes on. Saturn's there saying no, plus Jupiter's going retrograde, so the energy's having to go in.
Yeah.
So it's like all things from within first, and then they manifest outside. So if you've been trying to get some sort of validation from the outside world, it may not manifest till after these transits kind of come in.
And was that the 9th as well?
Yeah, this is May 9th,
Okay.
Jupiter, and it's squaring Saturn, and it's still moving towards Saturn, though, so
Right.
the square's not done yet.
Because Saturn's retrograde.
Because Saturn is retrograde, and Jupiter's going to be moving now towards it. Now, they were moving both backwards. Now they're going to, come into that Ithisala formation where they're, like, aspecting each other.
Right. Ithisala.
The
You're talking
Ithisala-
crazy Persian astrology there, aren't you?
No, let's get to have multi languages with the astrology. There's roots in all the cultures. So
Yeah.
it's-
Well,
it's
one of the interesting things about Jupiter and going direct is that it's been in tropical Virgo. And Jupiter typically doesn't work real well in Virgo because there's a abundance of focus on the details, when Jupiter is more interested in the bigger picture. So maybe if you were lost in the details, whether it's with your finances or any other things that Jupiter represents, after May 9th, the details will still be somewhat troublesome because it's still in Virgo. But maybe you understand them better, how to put them into perspective, so you're not as overwhelmed by the details of your finances. Or when you think about Jupiter in the sign of tropical Virgo, consider the house, again, in your chart that is in. And that can show you where you've been too caught up in the minute details of things, so you couldn't move forward in that regard.
And, we've been having our little side conversations about paying attention to these planets in the Navamsha
Oh, right.
and
Yes.
in the Varga divisional charts. And so, look and see where Jupiter is hanging out in the Navamsha.
Right.
And if that's going to aspect a prominent house in your Navamsha, that could be bringing in expansion. So not only looking at it within the Rashi chart, but seeing how it's working, because these planets are moving around much quicker when you get into the divisional Vargas. And so you'll have Jupiter in a better dignity or Rashi aspecting a house in one of your Varga charts. So that's an interesting way to start looking at it.
Yeah, it's a little more technical for you all who aren't so astrologically oriented, but
But you can go back and watch the video later.
Yeah.
You can always learn in
Right.
layers and levels. So.
it's a good idea to, if you are learning astrology, to start to take the actual transit right now into the Vargas to see how it impacts your Varga. That's going to be the topic of one of our classes coming up this fall, so you can follow astrovedicastrology.com for announcements on that. But she brings up a very good point, so thank you, Channing.
Well, it's fun to play with, too,
Yes.
as we start looking at these things. And then we've also got a lot of these planets heading into exact trines right after May, that new moon. We start moving into the Sun trining the North Node. We've got Venus trining Jupiter exactly in conjunction. We've got Mercury that's going to trine that Pluto and trine Jupiter. So there's a lot of these planets are going to click in all that week and onward and really bring in the more harmonious element of the energies together with those planets. But one thing to also be cautious about is to keep moving, to don't get too stagnant or lazy, because Taurus is a fixed sign, and that's one of the shadow sides of Taurus, is that it can be a little lazy, and that's one of the shadow sides, a little bit of trine energies. Because when you've got your squares, you're pushed, you're stressed out, you're going to do whatever it takes. When you've got your trines, a lot of times we don't always motivate to use that energy as much, and it's easier to just kind of like let the day go by just enjoying it, which is important. But Taurus can be real laid back. And so you definitely, and that's what it looked like to me for those whole 2 weeks in the middle of May.
And what are those 2 weeks then? Just so we're
well,
clear.
starting from the new moon and then going from May 9th, May 10th, May 12th, May 13th, we've got Mercury and Venus actually conjuncting.
Right.
So that's real fun. And then May 15th, the moon's going to move in to Virgo and be there with Jupiter and trine all those things that are in there. And Ryan really likes the moon.
I do like the moon with Jupiter and Rahu a little bit.
Jupiter. So on the 15th, that's kind of a good day to look at. And plus, we've got that Mercury and Venus in good conjunction in Taurus. We've got strong harmonies with Pluto. We've got the moon coming in on May 15th in a trine like that. Like, I think this is a good time to, like, focus on making a little money. You know, because Virgo is work and service, and Taurus is going to be our resources. So if you're really wanting to, like, plan a day to, you know, whatever it is that has to do with finances and resources, that could be a positive situation that
So
day.
May 15th would be a good day to, like, start things that could generate more money for you or explore them?
Yeah, well, the moon is moving towards full, so
Right.
it's getting in those angles with the Saturn and Jupiter, Neptune squaring going on. So there's a push there with that, but it's also in harmony and it's trining. Now the planets are still in retrograde though, so it's a matter of letting these ideas coming to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a matter of really like paying attention to the new information that can really be there with
Right.
some of it. It's not always about the activity actually starts on that particular moment. You can try it out. There's other things when you're looking at Mujerta that you're going into
Right,
much
definitely.
differently. So I'm not going to suggest that's the day.
Right.
But pay attention on that day. Pay attention for new opportunities coming to you that day. Write things down when you're starting to get insights. You know, Moon and Jupiter is great for writing. So
definitely.
you can like channel more efficiency, you know, when you're going through that. Because you've got these planets in retrograde. We're waiting for the information while these planets are going retrograde. So meet the universe halfway, do some stream of consciousness journaling.
Right.
Trying to get, do some, idea some idea bubbles and getting these things out. So May 20th, the energy shifts a little bit.
How so?
Oh, well, the sun's going to go into that sign of Gemini. And so there's an interesting click because we're moving out of the trines now with the sun moving out and back into the squares.
Yeah.
Back into the squares. And we want to pay attention to what we have in Virgo, too, because the sun is the 12th cusp lord from the sign of Virgo. So as it clicks into that square with everything, there may be some elements of life where you have to focus on self or self-sacrifice on some level. And it's just that whole time period where sun is going to be in the sign of Gemini is going to be an important one to walk in balance with.
Right. And it's important to remember this idea of self-sacrifice. It doesn't have to mean that you chop off your arm.
No, please don't.
Yeah.
That's not our recommendation.
It could mean something as much as, well, you've got a business and you want to make your business work well, so you might have to sacrifice going to your kid's soccer game. Or, you want to have a good relationship, so you have to sacrifice, working later. So anyway, the point I think she's getting at is around May 20th, and it's going to go that way for a month.
Yeah.
Right? It's a whole month that the sun is in Gemini, squaring Saturn.
So the sun's in Gemini every year at this time frame, but because of the other big time players, the North Node, Saturn, Jupiter, Neptune, this is clicking it in.
Right.
And so it's an interesting. It's just an interesting time. The sun is going to ask us to
make tacos. That's kind of what it looks like you
make
drew there.
tacos. I just made sure I paid attention to that because, right after that, on the next day, on the 21st, we've got our full moon.
The full moon, right.
We've got our full moon in Sagittarius, and so
that'll be interesting.
this is going to bring to light some of the energy. So we got sun moving into Taurus saying, oh, okay, well, you've got to focus on your path and self along with these things. What are you going to choose?
Yeah.
And we've got Jupiter, Neptune, Saturn there talking about in which ways are we really going to get down to truth? In which ways are we really, really going to see what we need to let go of, what we need to stay focused on, what our belief systems are? And it brings the energy not only from Virgo, Pisces, it really highlights the energy in Gemini and Sagittarius. So
Right.
it's bringing that focus onto those that other axis there that we've been focused on, the Pisces Virgo. Click, here it comes. And Gemini's fact. Gemini's information. Gemini's all the thousands of different sources of information that
Right.
you can gather without our perceptions being laid onto it. It's just the information itself. And Sagittarius is all our beliefs.
Yes.
It's all our hopes. It's all our ideals. It's a lot of conditioning that we've gotten from our nurturing environments, from our parents, the ninth house, from our religious leaders, our mentors, our teachers. So we're going to be in a little duality of taking fact and information, and
Well, it's going to be with the full moon
it's the
with
full moon
Saturn.
with Saturn.
So
yeah.
it's
and
going
Mars
to
is still
yeah. So
too.
it's going to point out to you
Right.
where your fallacies are.
where our belief systems
Are
may,
false.
Yeah, where our
Right.
belief systems may have been conditioned to keep us from absorbing all of the facts and information.
Yeah. So pay attention during that full moon, May 21st, that if things just aren't working out the way you want them to, or they're not matching up with you the way you knew it was in that belief system, that's the time to just ask yourself, well, what are the beliefs I have that are not lining up with my actual experience?
And Saturn has an interesting way of showing us these things. If we're really resistant, like if you're really super attached, because Saturn's job is to sort of detach us. So if you're really, really attached to a certain perception or certain belief that something is the way you think it is, Saturn may come in and actually show you with a lesson or with some, element of Saturn that you need to change your beliefs a little bit. You
Right.
need to become more open-minded. This is really an opportunity to open your mind. This is an opportunity to release belief systems, even unconsciously, because we've got Mars getting ready to go back into Scorpio. We've been talking about how the Scorpio energy plays into it. And allowing yourself to change, allowing yourself to grow with this tension of Saturn and Jupiter.
Right.
So I think that's going to be an interesting one. There's no trines.
Yeah.
There's no supportive necessarily. It's not necessarily, the worst full moon in the world, but there's none of this harmony that's coming in there that's going to make it a little bit smoother or easier.
It's about loving reality.
It's very much of a realistic sort of down to earth, and fire burning up. So all of the elements are kind of included in this one. And the sun, the sun is authority and consistency and direction. And Mars, they're going to be opposition to each other. So they're going to be in direct opposition with each other during this full moon. And so Mars is action and force and energy, and the sun is like that consistency. So I do think we're going to have a little push-pull with this one.
Yeah.
And that energy can best be used with, super focused discipline and direction, and allowing your mind to open with all of it. Don't get stuck, don't get rigid during this kind of transit. Like, really try to take some space. We've been preparing for it and gearing it up with all that energy in Pisces, learning how to let go. No, tap into that, during this one. And then Venus enters Gemini, going on May 24th.
Well, that'll make it a little bit sweeter, maybe.
Yeah,
Possibly.
yeah. I mean, we've got Venus following the sun pretty closely.
Yeah.
So we're getting into combust Venus. So while Venus is really strong in the sign of Taurus, it is going to follow closely with the sun. Even during that full moon, there's a loose conjunction because Venus is in such late degrees.
Right.
So the comforts that you're used to having during stuff like this may not be there, with Venus getting combust, but don't worry about it. It's not going to last forever. It's just a transit for this time to go inward and allow it to, bring you the information that you need. But what's nice is that Venus soothes Mars.
Right.
So you are going to have
Gives a
this
little
combust.
fulfillment.
It allows you to direct your passions to what you love. Instead of just Mars, opposing the authority of someone saying, no, you can't do this or whatever, Venus comes in and says, well, redirect it so that you can really focus on what you love. Find your creative outlet. Find your Gemini. Find your expression. Find
Your
all
interests, your hobbies. Yeah.
your friendships.
Your friendships.
Your ability to talk and
Right.
communicate about this stuff, like using these energies with the cycles that are very much easier than forcefully pushing, with the Mars energy there. And then Mars is going to move, back into the sign of Scorpio, like I'd said, on
Right.
May 27th. So that's happening, after that opposition with the sun and everything. And we've got another nice aspect. Well, the moon, when the moon moves out of that full moon and moves into the sign of Capricorn, right after that full moon, it's going to conjunct Pluto. And it's going to trine Jupiter, and it's going to trine Mercury. So there's the next trine day, is right, May 25th.
May 25th.
And what's nice, if you look in the Navamsha, in the D9 of the transits, all those planets are in Taurus. So there's this nice energy back to, ability to procure the resources out of the difficult times. And Pluto is still really heavily involved in all this, so that's good. May 26th is that exact conjunction, I believe, Saturn and Jupiter. So, hang in there. Saturn and Jupiter. We should talk about some remedies.
Saturn and Jupiter. Saturn and Jupiter. That would be taking a bath in Epsom salts, right? That's what the sages say.
A cold bath.
A cold bath in Epsom salt. A cold bath in Epsom salt.
Well, you're not supposed to have it too hot anyway, so tepid, potentially. But that's purification. The Epsom salts and baking soda can be pulling these things out of your skin, and that's a practice, which is Saturn, likes repetition. So
the ancient sages didn't say that. We just talked about it earlier. So
yeah, we were thinking
if
about
ancient was 10 minutes ago and we are the sages, then yes.
With Saturn and Jupiter, with Mars, it's been all about that. It's really about being patient. We're really still in these slowly but surely. And as Jupiter moves more direct, then we'll have more of that Jupiter energy expanding after it's moves away from Saturn here. But it is.
Well, the
intense.
other problem with Saturn and Jupiter is that it can make a person somewhat focused on their dogmas or their beliefs that they really want to be true, because deep down inside they don't really believe them themselves. And that can be problematic, because how can you have a conversation with someone that says they want to have a conversation with you, but really they just don't believe in their own self, so they're just trying to kind of get you to agree with them. So it's kind of a strange energy.
And it is going on during that full moon, which is why I was saying, just don't jump to conclusions.
Right, don't jump to conclusions.
Yeah,
right.
Don't jump to conclusions. And Saturn and Jupiter can bring out the skeptic.
The skeptic, yeah.
The skeptic in us. And that's an interesting piece, because you've got the Gemini Sagittarius axis going on there. So we're taking leaps of faith.
Well, it's also a skeptic that's not really understanding how faith works in the first place, or how the bigger picture functions. So it's taking that Jupiter and it's making it think that by getting into the details, by nitpicking everything, by looking at all the problems that Saturn represents, that then you're going to find the truth. And that's not how Jupiter works at all. So personally, I would think that'd be a wonderful time to work more on prayer, devotion, surrender, seeing the good in all people, things of that nature.
Gratitude journal.
Right.
I mean, gratitude journal. There's your Jupiter-Saturn square remedy, is every day writing something down that you feel grateful for. Because the more you pull that out, the more you focus on that, the more that will resonate in your thoughts. And so Saturn's there going to be pointing out, this isn't good enough, and I believe things should be more like this, and I want to push more for what I need and want, and that kind of thing. And that's why I say just be patient. Go within, like you said, with prayer. Focus on gratitude.
Right.
If you're going to nitpick on details, nitpick on how beautiful something is.
Right. But don't pull it apart. Just look at it.
Yeah, redirect the thoughts. And hopefully we'll be able to do that with these, strong influences in Taurus, be able to help us see the beauty in things.
Yeah. What about May 29th?
We got the moon moving into Pisces. And so that's the last part of the month.
Which will be nice, because then we'll have the opposition of Moon and Jupiter again.
We'll have the opposition of Moon and Jupiter. Moon is also going to be conjuncting Neptune. And then conjuncting K2. So there's some creativity that can come in from that. There's some Moon Neptune. I tend to get a lot of psychic hits, which is always interesting, because half the time it's just random information that I don't necessarily need to know, but it's always interesting to get your intuition on. And so just pay attention to those kinds of things. It is
so following your intuition on the 29th.
Yeah, following your intuition. Don't get lost in fantasy too much. Don't believe all these things you're hearing. Don't turn the news on that day if you can avoid it, because it's misinformation sometimes when Neptune's in there. We're going to connect with what we think is the best thing to hear, and not necessarily. So it's all about coming to these truths that are happening in some level. And this is lining up for the beginning of June, and we're going to start seeing all of those planets opposing Saturn.
Yes.
So we'll talk about that part in June, but this is definitely a great month to be utilizing the square to the best of its ability. Don't get caught in the tension. It's all going to pass. It's all going to pass. These are just cycles. These are just cycles. And yeah, I think that's about most of what I have for this month. Do you have anything to add?
I don't have anything to add because I've been working like a dog and I haven't had a chance to schedule anything. So I put her to work to
I just start writing.
To start writing.
Comes out
and it works out well.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that is nice about that full moon is that it is in Anuradha.
Right.
And that's a gentle nakshatra. So that's a nice energy to have that full moon in. And then despite the fact that we've got all these squares going on, be compassionate with yourself.
Right.
Don't give yourself a hard time. It is it's Mitra, the Lord of compassion. That's, and worship. So like you had said, prayer and giving that love to all the beauty of creation. Don't get focused too much on that Saturn.
Yeah. The only thing I was paying extra attention to for this month when I was looking at the transits was getting that May 6th, May 5th, 6th, and 7th time period being a great time for new beginnings. Being a great time to prune off those things which are no longer serving you and to plant new seeds so they'll grow. But again, it's things that you're already aware of, I would think, not necessarily things that you want to start immediately new from the very beginning. And then that full moon, well, I personally think it's going to be an alright full moon.
Good.
I think that people are going to learn some things about where they've made some mistakes in the past, and they're going to learn from those mistakes. They're going to be able to see, how to achieve their higher goals and their higher purposes by reflecting upon those mistakes. So those are the two main things I was looking at every month. So.
And with the moon conjuncting Mars, with all of this happening with Mars, just try to be patient.
Right. Yes.
Slow down.
Don't push it. Don't push it too fast, because if you push it too fast and too hard, it may break.
And you may not get all the information that you're supposed to get. You may not get the reflection that you're supposed to get. Like, this is an opportunity kind of transit.
Right.
So take the time don't miss out.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in, and we'll be back again in June. Currently, we're at the Biltmore. Maybe I'll try to get an image of it before we wrap up here today. And next month, we'll be somewhere in Fairview, possibly. We'll see.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we'll be in touch. Talk to you.